I think what Irma did not talk about is the first company I started, when it got acquired, they fired only one person, and that was me. So I've been fired 3 times. The second company I started, our third company, Chief Outsiders, is one of the fastest growing companies in the US. But I decided to self-fire myself and hand it over because I felt like it wasn't the right place for me. So the bio doesn't talk about all the firings and the failure. So we're going to talk about failure. So when you're talking about a subject that you're an expert in, and I'm like, thanks for coming to me to talk about failure. I'm good at that. You started noticing things. And so I just was looking at the news, and there's an article that came out the other day, and I was thinking, well, interesting. Did you know? So this always makes me feel better. Henry Ford, his first venture to build a motor car got dissolved 1.5 years after it was started because stockholders lost confidence in him. So I was like, oh, interesting. So there's more. Walt Disney was fired at his early job at the Kansas City newspaper because he was not creative enough. Richard Branson dropped out of school at 16 and started a magazine which failed. And then it goes on to say that he failed at Virgin Cola, Virgin Vodka, Virgin Clothes, Virgin Vi, Virgin Cards. But he has like 17 other virgins that are successful. Oprah Winfrey was fired for not being unfit for television. Y'all know about J.K. Rowling? She's actually pretty inspirational because she was a single mother on welfare. And most people said that her manuscripts for, what did she write again? Weren't good for kids. I mean, she created an empire. Bill Gates, my favorite is H.J. Heinz set up a company that produced horseradish, which went bankrupt shortly after. If y'all don't know, Heinz is the guy that made ketchup. And then I saw another article just a few days ago about students that, 10 years after high school, there's this private school in New York. They record stuff about what they want to be 10 years later so they can read it. And one of the people that they call out is this woman that says she remembers feeling so emotional about the decision that she hedged against the possibility of failure. So in her video she said, quote, "I hope no matter what you end up doing or how much money you make, even if it's not in music, I hope you'll be happy." And so I think failure is a pretty consistent topic that we talk about a lot. So we've invested in 34 companies that are energy technology companies the last 3 years. 29 are still in business, which tells you that 5 have already failed. We see failure quite a bit around us. But I do want to disclaim that, just make sure that perhaps the purpose of me being here today is just to serve as a warning for you guys of what not to do. I love this quote by Eric Hoffer. It says, "The feeling of being hurried is not usually the result of living a full life and having no time. It is, on the contrary, born of a vague fear that we are wasting our life. When we do not do the one thing we ought to do, we have no time for anything else. We are the busiest people in the world." I used to spend a lot of time on airplanes, and I'd see people in airports always checking their phones. Now, that's all I do now anyway. This is back in the BlackBerry world. I'm like, what are they doing? They're so important. But I read this quote, and it struck me, like, these people are frantic because they haven't figured out their purpose. And so I'm going to make an argument today that perhaps maybe they're failing. So just some alarming truths. We know this. Most people are stressed at work. At Surge, actually, we love what we do. So I'm just going to say that's an exception. There's 33% increase in heart attacks on Monday mornings, blah, blah, blah. Male suicides are the highest on Sunday nights because we don't want to go to work in the morning. Think about it. These are true. And then, this is, before I read these articles, think about the decisions, the failures of even companies. Like, the telephone has too many shortcomings. Like, this is not going to get off the ground. This is 1876. We don't even know who Western Union is anymore. There's no reason why anyone would want a computer in their home. That's stupid. That was a company called DEC. Probably no one in this room even knows what that company is. You do, yeah, DEC. There you go. So after being fired multiple times and marrying the wrong person the first time, thank God I have the ability to relive, because my best decision I made in my life is my wife in the room, which is awesome. But I spent a lot of time, my first company was a broadcasting company, and I broadcasted golf on the radio, which is super cool at cocktail parties. Like, what do you do? I do radio on golf. But I spent a lot of time around these professional golfers, and I learned something really interesting. So these two guys up here, one's the #1 golfer in the world. The second guy is the guy that in order for him to be able to play on the tour the next year, he's on the cut line. It's the 120th player. Do you know the difference between those two guys? It's very minimal. It's actually, I think it's going to boom, 3%. It's only, so if you don't know anything about golf, you go out and you play 18 holes every day. And the difference between those two guys is only like a few strokes. It's not a big difference. So one guy is actually making $20 to $30 million a year. The next guy is barely making enough money to feed his family. And the difference between them is not a lot. I mean, it's a big difference, but when you actually look at it, you're like, these guys look exactly the same, so what's the difference? And so it made me think a lot about my life, what I want to do after being fired multiple times, because I'm horrible to work with. And I just came to the conclusion, like, there's got to be something more, and it's not just about what I do. And looking at my life and failing in early days by picking the wrong person to wake up next to every day, I started thinking about, like, what am I going to do with myself? So you guys, you don't have to take a piece of paper out, because none of you probably have paper. So write this down in your head. And I want you to think about one number. And so think about this number. So we're going to get a little bit dark here, because we're talking about failure. What age are you going to die? So most of you in this room, it's going to be based on, think about it, who has actually ever thought about this before? It's a tough subject. What age are you going to die? So most of us, either we have family history, we know people around us, but what age? Has anyone thought about what age? So think about that number in your head. So about 7 to 10 years ago, I did this, and I was like 65. And now I was like, that's old. There's no way I'm going to live that long. That's pretty good. So I started thinking about, like, what are the things that I want to be? It says physical, but I'll go through this. What are the things that I want to be? Because I love I love work, but it's not just about work, because I started my favorite company in the world. Golf on the radio, I know, probably doesn't sound interesting to some people, but I loved it. It was the most fun job I've ever had. It was incredible. And then they fired me. And I went on this journey of, like, who am I? Like, that didn't solve, ultimately it didn't solve my problems. It was the greatest job ever. They fired me. I'm having hard times in other areas of my life. I'm like, this is not the end all be all of life. So I started thinking about, well, what do I care about? Well, there's physical. I want to be healthy. There's my career, which mattered to me. There's my family, which I have 5 amazing kids. There's, like, me personally. Am I doing anything to grow? Socially, what do I want to do in the community? Spiritual, like, is there something bigger out there that's bigger than myself? And then there's financial. So let me break this down. So what is physical? This includes your diet, exercise, sleep habits. So I started thinking about, what do I want to be physically? Career, your ambitions, dreams, hopes. It should be a reflection of who you want to be. So in the book Millionaire Mind, it's a great book, but he researches, like, who are the most successful people in the world? And he was wrong. It's you inherit. That's how you do it. And so the reality is it's actually those people that absolutely love what they do. There's no other trait. It's not education, it's not family, it's not career, it's not what you studied in college. It's absolutely the most wealthy and people in the world that made it themselves, besides inheriting, are those that absolutely love what they do. End of story. So career is a reflection of, you better be doing something you love to do, or success might be really tough. Family, your relationship to others. So what do you want, your development of your children, where do you want to live? That matters. I love this quote. I've read it for years because I think it's pretty powerful. In a speech to graduates at Wellesley College, Barbara Bush said, "Whatever the era, whatever the times, one thing will never change: fathers and mothers. If you have children, they must come first. You must read your children, you must hug your children, you must love your children. Your success as a family, our success as a society, depends not on what happens in the White House, but on what happens in your house. So what do you want your family to look like?" I think that matters. Personal development, knowledge, education, self-improvement. So how are you improving outside of your job or outside of home? Socially, community involvement and friendships. Have you, forgiven those that you have hurt? Are you teaching someone to fish? So what do you want to be socially? So these are my 7 categories, by the way. And I don't believe in work-life balance. I believe in there's 7 things that I've categorized. I'm like, these are things that are important that I've never really thought about before, because I just sort of every day wake up thinking, what's going on? I need some cornflakes. What's next? So volunteering is the ultimate exercise in democracy. You vote in elections once a year, but when you volunteer, you vote every day about the kind of community you want to live in. So I think there's how do you fit in to the social world that you live in? Do you want to give back? How do you want to give back, if at all? Spiritual, what are you a part of that's bigger than yourself? That's my definition of spirituality. So I thought about I'm spiritually bankrupt. When I was going through this exercise, I have some pretty firm beliefs, but what do I want to be a part of? Because I'm not being a part of it right now. And then financially, or of course spiritual. He who is filled with love is filled with God himself. I love that quote. And then financial. So I started thinking about those things in my life. Sorry. And I went through the exercise in the boxes, these are the things, and I wrote down things that I want to do. I want to surf often. I want to run long distances. I want to have a career that's inspiring and empowering. I don't want to be a burden. I want to have relationships reigning in love, meaning I don't want a whole lot of people hating on me right now. I want to learn Spanish. Still haven't checked that box yet. I want to write a book. Socially, I want to teach people to fish and create social enterprises. I want to leave a legacy of service as spiritual. And then I want to be abundant and philanthropic. So I actually spent time thinking about these categories. And I was like, okay, I want to actually do these things. This is what I would say. These are my goals, if you will. If you were all those things, so if I went through that list, and if I was all those things a year before that age 65, so in 1 year prior, I could run long distances. I was abundant. I was teaching people how to fish. I was giving back. Had relationships. My children love me. We have great relationships. My wife and I get along. I'm learning. Would I really die a year later? And I thought, no way. That can't be possible. There's no way I'd die that early. So the question is how many extra years would that add to my life? Does that make sense? If you really were all those things, if you think about those 7 categories, and if I was all those things, would I really die in a year? I went through that exercise, there's no way I'll die at 60. It's 64 if I'm surfing, and because I actually surfed this summer, and there are guys that were 65 out there in 8-foot waves on longboards, laughing, having a blast. I was like, okay, these guys are not going to die anytime soon unless a great white shark eats them. It doesn't count. But that's the truth. So would you really die? So how many extra years would that add to your life? So I was like, 20. I'm not going to die at 65 anymore. I've got 85. Now I'm good. So what's the next question on failure? Well, so the next question is why, why wait till 65 to start doing those things? So I went through this exercise about 7 years ago. And since that time, I went back to say, okay, what did I accomplish? I'm just looking back. Well, guess what? I've already run 100 miles in the mountains. Like, I wanted to run an ultra race. I've already done that. I was like, holy crap. I want to travel the world. I want to spend most of my time with my friends and family, which I do. Luckily, I didn't before. I want to create and invest in world-changing ideas that inspire and empower. And I want to create social enterprises that help people. Like, look at Surge, at what we do. Like, what I do for my job now, that's exactly what I said I was going to do. And so when I think about failure, which I fail every single day, but I look back 7 years ago, I was like, I was on a path to a joke that friends of mine in college used to talk about, all roads lead to Mount Fuji. What that means is, like, I was just headed to anywhere. And while I kind of like that, I kind of sort of like the, like, let's just get on the road and see where we end up. I was going nowhere. And so my definition of failure was, I'm going nowhere quick. I want to change that. And I want to outline what I want my life to be. And I want to live a legacy. So am I still failing? I've failed a ton. But Chief Outsiders, one of the companies I started, the best decision I ever made was, I don't feel like this is the right place for me. Of course, 2 days ago, my co-founder writes me saying, hey, we're on the Inc. 5000, one of the fastest growing companies. Thanks for starting this thing. I was like, great. And I have zero regret. I was like, I wasn't supposed to be there. And I don't want to waste my time doing something that I don't want to be doing with myself. And so failure is like, I don't even know what that means. Like, I'm the description of, like, I've failed way too many times. I continue to fail. But I think when I was thinking about failure, I'm like, what I don't want to do is have all these regrets, because I've lived my entire life sort of waking up, not thinking about proactively what I want to be. And it's not like I want to be successful. It's like, I want to be on those 7 things abundant. Like, I want to, like, physically, I want to be active. And so I really realized, like, wow, those things actually came true without me being one of those people that wakes up and has the goals listed on my mirror. And so my thought is, the question is, when do you want to take those extra years? I've seen people cry thinking about this exercise, because a lot of, especially if you had a mom or dad die young, it's like a lot of people are like, I'm going to die young. I'm like, well, you have the power to control your death. And so failure to me is not about your job. Failure to me is about, are you thinking about who you want to be? And it's not just about what you do. It's not just about where you live, but it's like thinking about all those things and being proactive about it and thinking, okay, what do I want to be? Failure is not doing it, is my thought. And I'm the first to say, and I've fired quite a few people, but I'm also the first to fire myself. It's like, if I'm not in the right place, like, I don't want to spend the rest of my life regretting because I'm getting a big paycheck. And my wife and I have a few people that we know that they have gained the whole world and lost their soul. They're miserable people. They have worldly things beyond understanding, but they're miserable. So it's like, that's not the secret in life. And so, so when do you want to take those extra years? So I kind of ran through that quickly. But if you go home or spend time thinking about, okay, when am I going to die? And then you categorize your own things, but those are 7 that I wrote down. What do you want to be? And put those down. And then if it adds any extra years to your life, like, do you live them now? Why wait? Because that bus is waiting for you. At least I used to be convinced in college that campus bus was going to take me out, and it hasn't yet. So I want to end with this quote that I love. And I think it's something like this is one of our core values at Surge is work is love made visible. If we don't love what we do, we need to leave. But work is, and I think career, before I read this, career is really what we spend most of our time in our life doing. Like, I never want to retire, ever. I love what I do. Now, what I do might change, but I'm not going to quit because I love it. But I spend more time at my job than I do at home most of the time. So it's like, it better be something I love to do. And I think that is really important. So work is love made visible. And if you cannot work with love, but only with distaste, it is better that you should leave your work and sit at the gate of the temple and take alms of those who work with joy. For if you bake bread with indifference, you bake bitter bread that feeds but half man's hunger. And if you grudge the crushing of grapes, your grudge distills the poison in the wine. And if you sing those angels and love not the singing, you muffle man's ears to the voices of the day and the voices of the night. All work is empty save when there is love. And when you work with love, you bind yourself to one another and to God. So those are my thoughts, and I don't pretend to know everything. I pretend that like I'm on this journey to not fail. And failure is not living up to who I was made to be. And it's not you. It's not you. It's not you. It's me. And so it's like I'm pursuing my dreams, not yours. And I want to make sure that I'm cognizant about those things that matter to me. Because the last thing, what scares me about failure ultimately is waking up saying, I have nothing. And ultimately it's I think relationships is ultimately what matters most. So I don't know if that's what you guys wanted to hear about failure, but it's something that's on my mind. And we see entrepreneurs fail every day. And sometimes we force them to fail because they're trying to make something work that's not going to work. And they're going to end up in 10 years hating themselves and trying to throw knives at their partners. It's like we see this consternation. But I hope this has been helpful. So thank you very much for your time. Yes, sir.
So, are you going to be teaching social entrepreneurship?
We teach entrepreneurs that are focused on energy how to be successful. And my dad was an entrepreneur, and so am I. And I believe one of the best social enterprises in the world is entrepreneurship, because they hire people. And a bunch of people used to work for my dad, and the one thing I learned watching him was that you give people hope and dreams so they can go back home and feed their families. And like, there's no greater work than that. And so I love the entrepreneur, and I want to make them successful so that they can go build a business, and those people hire people. And like, there's nothing great, like people take pride in what they do. Very few people, no one I've ever met likes a handout. I spent time in college, spent a couple of years playing around in Mexico surfing with one guy's in jail now, so that was probably a bad decision. But I learned from a few local Mexicans, they were like, dude, don't over tip, man, seriously. They take like, in the area of Mexico we were, like, they don't like it. I was like, why is that? Like, because they want to earn what you give them. And there's a pride about that. So I'm like, people feel good about their job. Like, there's pride in your work. And if you don't have it, like Irma's husband, he has this incredible sculpture on the outside of her building. It's our logo. It's amazing. It's like, I don't know how much proud he is of it, but we're proud of it. We're like, look at this thing. Like, we show it off all the time. I'm like, there's something beautiful about work. And so work is good. So my belief on like what we do is like, we help people succeed. And if they're successful, they're going to hire people. Yes, sir. We'll go for that.
What experience of failure are you most grateful for?
Grateful for? I hate to fail. Grateful for. I don't know how to answer that question. I will say this, being vulnerable. I'm not a big fan of divorce, having gone through it. I actually don't recommend it because I think it creates lifelong failure for not just you, but many people. I'm glad, like, that was a great learning experience. Probably, I'm not saying I'm glad to do it, but it really changed my life for the best. And it was the worst, hardest thing I've ever done. Like, running 100 miles at 10,000 feet elevation was actually easier. I was like, I'd do that once a week if I could. But I think, I hate to say what, doesn't kill you makes you stronger, blah, blah, blah. But I think that experience was for me, put me in a much better place. And then walking around knowing, like, I've failed big time. Like, there's no longer pretending that I've done everything right in life, because I tried to do it that way. I was like, okay, I've failed. Like, where do you go from here? And I think that, released some weight off my shoulders to much degree.
I was just going to ask, what was your pivot point that brought you to examine these things? And then also, what did you draw on to make that kind of turnaround? What in your experience, what in people from whom you've learned, what did you draw on to change the direction?
Good question. I think that what started the ball rolling was starting my first company and making it. It was very successful, but I failed in the business, and I also failed with my personal life was failing. I was like, it taught me, like, succeeding, creating a great company and being successful was not what I thought it was. Because I thought, I just want to be like, I want to be the next Bill Gates, and if I do that, everything takes care of itself. And that was the turning point. It's like, that's not really what life's about. And I was like, that really wasn't what I thought it was going to be. And so I better be doing something that I really feel called to be and do. And I better be putting myself in situations that, even though life is never easy, it's like it's where I need to be. And so I think I didn't completely realize that. I had a bunch of paradigms in my head that I learned from early age that I just thought, well, you never fail, you never get divorced, you always make straight A's, you win. What happens if you don't? Well, then you walk around life going, well, that didn't work. Where do you go from here? And so I think that was the big turning point. That set in motion a lot of bad decisions and a lot of good ones, but it definitely changed my life, I'll tell you that. Being fired from my own company was tough, but it was a great learning experience. Any other questions?
Are you scared of failure, or do you see it as kind of a step towards eventual success? Do you fear it, or do you embrace it?
This is not an Aquila and the Bee reference, but it sort of is. I'm afraid of succeeding sometimes. It's not the failure. Like, I'm not afraid to fail. I'm afraid to succeed sometimes. Like, and so I think, I talk about that a lot at home. My wife's brilliant at helping me think through it, but sometimes I'm afraid to win, to succeed. That's the scarier of the two arguments. Like, are you going to take the step that you need to take, completely be uncomfortable? It's not the failure part, it's are you ready to take what's possible? And so I flipped that on my head, and that was something that I really thought about. It's like I tend to, it's easier to stay in this sort of mode that I can help myself. I can think, yeah, I failed, but no one else is doing this, and I'm like, wait, am I afraid to win, to succeed? And I think that's the bigger question for me. And so, no. Someone else had a question. Yes, sir.
So, in your list of the 7 things, you have a lot going on. How do you know for yourself when to shift gears?
Prioritize.
Prioritize. Like, hey, it's time to go run, it's time to serve, it's time to work. Like,
Right. I used to work for Dell in the 90s, and we used to talk about work-life balance. Like this just doesn't exist. I don't think balance is the right word. How do you prioritize? I'm not sure. Like my wife and I are in a season where we have 5 kids that are in school. Like they're really important to us. Soon they're going to go off to college. Like we're going to have a different season of our life, and it's going to change. We're building Surge. It's like that's really important to me right now. It's like we have to prioritize work. So there are times when I just can't do certain things that I really want to do. Like I love playing golf. I don't play golf very much. When I really want to do it, it's like, and I'm good at it to some degree, not like those other guys that I've showed on the screen. But I'm like, I'm okay not playing because it's not a priority right now. And I'm not going to break the things that I have going on in my life. Like, we have, 8 a.m. soccer tournament tomorrow morning. It's like, that's important to me. Playing golf is not as important. And so I don't know how to prioritize, except like those are like my work's important, my relationships and my children are important, my wife's important. Other things are not as important to me. And so I don't know how to answer that, but I don't look at it as I have to balance everything because that's ridiculous. I don't understand that. And I think the one way I've described passion for people trying like, well, I don't know what I want to do with my life is like, well, think of a time in your life where you've had your head down and you've looked up and time has flown by. What were you doing? Everyone has that. Does everyone have? Just raise your hand. That's probably something you're passionate about. It's probably something you should do for the rest of your life. And when you're counting the minutes to like clock out, like that's not a good sign. And so I think about that too. It's like, what are the things that I love doing? Like I would probably be a surfer, beach bum for the rest of my life. It's not sustainable, but I can do that for hours and hours without even thinking about it. But I know like that doesn't pay the bills. It's not like, I realize like there's a clock in me too that's like, okay, you've had enough fun. Like it's time to go do something. Like I need to go do what I need to be doing right now. But when I'm 65, I'm going to be joining those 65-year-olds out in the water for 3 hours, however long they are. I'm like, I'll go probably spend more time in the water, probably. But that's how I sort of look at it. Yes, sir.
What do you envision your epitaph reading on your gravestone at age, whatever?
Golly. I'm Gen X, so we're totally the generation that, the question that people always say is like, what's your legacy going to be? I have 2 legacies epitaph. The most important is that my family is reigning in love more than anything else. That matters. That's the most important thing. That the children and me and my wife and all of us have abundance of love. Like I don't care anything else after that doesn't matter. My second epitaph is maybe for Surge and for the people I work with. I could care less, Hossein, don't listen to this. I care less about how financially successful we are and more about, I've spent 10 years with some people that I love being around and we have done great things together. So it's another relational piece to me. It's like, did we have good relationships? Did we go through good times and hard times together? That matters to me. Like the epitaph for me on that is, man, they had a great, those guys are connected at the hip. Work-wise. The legacy of the name of the building, that I don't care. But it's like people are like, man, they had a great relationship. Like they worked so well together. Like that to me is what I would like my children to see. So that's the legacy. I want my children to see me in doing something that I absolutely love to do. Because I want them to do that. And we live in a place in the world where they can afford to go chase some dreams and fail and still be okay. And I'd rather them do that than go be part of the Joe versus the volcano, if you've ever seen that movie, and hate their life. I'm like, I do not want that for them. All right, great. Thank you.